Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.
It's The In Show, Australia's only show dedicated to innovation from Adelaide, Australia and across the globe.
It's David Grice and Troy Sincock talking innovation. It's a Thursday, time for the second interview of the week.
Troy, the time has finally arrived.
Dun, dun, dun.
And we're going to tell you a story.
Yeah, we are. I'm not sure what story I've got to tell, David, but that list of questions is pretty imposing.
Now, Troy, I met you in your capacity as General Manager of Fresh 92.7, the job that you're currently in.
Yes.
About 5 years ago, and then we came together and developed this concept of the In Show last year. Now, you've got a passion for music, you've got a passion for radio, but you were born into a cricketing family.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad was a really well-known cricketer back at the time when state cricket was extremely popular, and so I was pretty much born with a cricket ball and bat in my hand and became, very good at an incredibly young age. But it really, I used to think that it was because I was gifted. I look back at it now and go, it had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that we literally were playing cricket from the womb. And by the time I got to primary school, when people started, playing cricket, I already had 5 years experience. So I've got Dad to thank for that, but certainly coming from a family where, my dad was doing big things and was well known at that time, that kind of had to step up and make sure I carved a niche for myself.
So obviously, living with the expectation of family and friends that your father had been such a shining light, and you would follow suit. I mean, how was that for you? How did you deal with that?
Well, I knew that I was a good cricketer at a young age, so that wasn't really a thing. But it was great growing up with a dad who was on television. He was consistently in the newspaper and that type of thing. I was very proud, and it wasn't. But I did recognise that other people's dads appeared to do ordinary things in comparison. So I knew that my dad was very different to the other dads. And I think it's him being the way that he is that's led me to do all the things that I've done, albeit slightly differently to him. But it's had me see that anything's possible, really. He just did the thing that he loved. And I think I sort of followed in his footsteps.
So why didn't you follow in the footsteps of cricket? You're not as passionate about it as what he was, or what was that?
Well, by the time I was 16, I've been playing cricket for 16 years. So that was a pretty lengthy career, even as a teenager. But unfortunately, I wasn't quite built like my dad. And I know my dad went through a lot of issues with injuries over the years. And back then, things were happening that probably aren't necessarily allowed now, just to get people out on the field. And because I'm a tall, thin person, my frame wasn't made for being a fast bowler, so I started having all sorts of issues with my back and that kind of thing. It became very hard for me, and I had to weigh up whether it was something that I wanted to do. And through high school, I discovered the arts, drama and fine art particularly. And I think I'd sort of thought, well, that doesn't require all this sort of practice, having to get on a bus and a tram and then walk, kilometres to get where I needed to be. I literally can just stay at home and do this stuff. Not that I was a lazy kid by any stretch of the imagination, but I knew that I had another passion, and that was really what led me to eventually doing radio, is my love of drama.
So tell us about that. I mean, obviously going through school, when you do get involved in the arts, there are certain labels that students put on you and all those sorts of things. I mean, it happened to me as a singer. How did you cope with that, and how did that build your character now? It
was really interesting because I kind of had allies on both sides and then a lot of confusion on one side. So, being able to be good at sport and good at the arts was extremely uncommon. Like, either you're good at one or the other, generally speaking, and so I managed to have acceptance from both, but there was a real confusion from those people that I played sport with as to why I would want to pursue that as a career, and often because perhaps the people that were great at sport didn't have the other skills that I had as well. So it was an interesting combination, but I found a freedom in being able to express myself artistically that I couldn't find on a cricket field, and then discovered that I could really create something from nothing. And it was that really inspired me to look at my life that way, I think, and just see that anything was really possible.
So going through that, where did you start with your career after that? So, you've got all this passion around the dramatic arts, and that's led you down, ultimately to where you are now. But what was the first step for you?
Well, what happened was there's this pivotal moment in year 12 where the teachers were asked to come around to their students because unemployment was so high. The teachers were asked to speak to the students and say, there are no jobs, stop doing this. And I remember being very, very angry because, my teachers, my drama teachers, my art teachers were my favourite teachers because these were the things that I developed such a love in. And here were these people that I trusted and almost saw them as a parental figure telling me that I can't do the thing that I wanted to do. And so the first reaction was being angry. And then I stopped to think about it and went, hang on, when I was being moderated in drama, they never really said I was any good at acting, but they often referred to how I spoke and my voice. And because as a kid, I was completely unaware of how I sounded. In fact, the only real understanding of my voice I had was being the best man at my dad's wedding when I was 14 and him then playing the video of the wedding to my then girlfriend. And I had like the highest voice of any teenager and thought that that's how I still sounded. But obviously something had happened in the years following that and I started sounding different. And then it made me think, what can you do with your voice? And so I decided to do a radio course. And from that course became a career in radio.
Wow. It's just amazing. And the course, how long did it go?
It was a 10-week course.
Wow.
I didn't want to go to university. You were asked to choose what subjects you wanted to do. I think I chose to pursue teaching just for those purposes, but had no intention whatsoever of doing it. The 10-week radio course, and just discovered that I really loved expressing myself in that way, and people's reactions to me were that I was good. I didn't necessarily know that I was good, but I started listening to myself through what other people were saying and recognising that I had a bit of a natural ability in this space. And in fact, my dad had been on radio when I was a kid doing a cricket report on radio. So I'd sort of grown up in radio studios, but never stopped to think about it being a career. And because it came so easily to me and it was a great form of self-expression and people seemed to like what I did, I'm like, this could be the thing. I won the course, met people, did community radio, and through meeting people in community radio, someone got a job in commercial radio and then got another job. They suggested that I could do their job, and foolishly I got my first commercial radio job when I was 17.
Wow. Wow. So tell me about the experience for you, because I know listening back to my voice, I find it pretty, oh my God. What was your first experience like, apart from obviously when you were, high-pitched voice?
You see that happen in people all the time when they hear their voice back either amplified or recorded for the first time. And you probably would have seen that in terms of recording singers who have never been in a studio before. I'll never forget working in a supermarket after school, and you could do spruiking in the store. Eventually, they gave me that job and they put me on this little course. And I remember being in a room with people that had been told that was going to be their job, but had no experience in it whatsoever. And, having them hear their voices for the first time and just the shock and horror that they sounded that way. I remember just feeling that because I used to learn my lines for drama by recording all the other lines in the script into a cassette player, and then once those lines were delivered, I'd press pause, then deliver my lines, I started getting an understanding of how I sounded. I didn't like how I sounded at all. In fact, I was kind of disappointed with the way I sounded, but I'm like, well, that's the voice I've got, so I'll just keep doing this. And then eventually I just developed more awareness of it. And that was at a time also when radio kind of required you to sound a certain way. That's not how it is anymore.
Yeah. So your first job, what station was it with?
It's working at 5AD, which is now Mix 102.3.
Yep.
And I was the youngest on staff by a significant amount. I remember working with all these people who were double my age and firstly going, okay, these people are my parents' age, and then realising that I felt some of them were less mature than I was. I was going, wow, dude, people that are like parents that have kids actually seem, younger than kids at times. I remember realising that, but then also realising what an extraordinary opportunity it was just to watch people who'd been learning their craft for decades and making it look effortless, be able to come to work and just witness that. I think more than being taught anything specifically, just the ability to observe others operating at a really high level has had such enormous impact on me, in the same way that my dad playing cricket at a high level had impact on my performance as a cricketer. I think I just started learning how to do radio very quickly and at a young age.
And what was your favourite part about the learnings that you had? Was there anyone specific that was the pivotal kind of, the one that taught you the most, or you sort of got under their wing as your mentor kind of thing? And
well, I think it was just more people that I used to listen to on the radio as a kid, because my parents would choose to listen to those stations, and so just by default that's who was on. So these voices that I'd grown up with, all of a sudden I was in the room with these people, and while no one necessarily took me under their wing per se, I just thought it was extraordinary to be able to work side to side with these people that were much older than me, who were doing exactly what I wanted to do. And who had this extraordinary command of the radio audience, but also of the staff, like how they were seen within the eyes of the staff as like the key people on staff, like the breakfast hosts. And, the 5DN was a talkback station in the same building. Jeremy Cordeau did a talkback show and was also the owner of the business at the time. An incredible entrepreneur. And having him interview the Prime Minister, walking into work as a teenager and, walking past the Prime Minister and having, the press gallery, around the studio recording, everything that was said because there was a political campaign underway. And I'd be changing the backup tapes in the background and, just listening in and seeing how these professionals operated. It was, it absolutely changed my life. And also made me realise that people that are operating at a high level are just people. Seeing the Prime Minister just be a person walking down the hall of the radio station, or seeing these people that were seen as voices held in high regards, and that they were just people and there were things that they needed to do to perform at a high level.
So what happened after 5AD?
5AD, I stayed there for a period of time, and then I never got the opportunity to be on the radio, and I always thought that I was good enough, but the truth of the matter is I definitely wasn't good enough, and there were people far better than me. So I eventually got a job working in Murray Bridge at a radio station where I finally got to be on the radio. I only stayed there for 6 months. It was a very challenging experience because it made me very humble, but the challenge of being in a regional area, although Murray Bridge is not far from Adelaide, was that the way that people were doing radio at that station, they thought it was the best way to do it. But here I was as a young guy, having been witness to all this extraordinary stuff and people operating at a very high level. And I realised that it could be done a different way, and that most of the people that got jobs in regional stations, that was the first job they'd had. And while I hadn't been doing the announcing job, I'd been there watching people do it for years, and I knew that it could be done better. And so I really struggled in that environment, and eventually pulled the pin after 6 months.
Yeah. Did you enjoy the on-air work, though?
No. I enjoyed the opportunity of being on air, but I never connected with the audience, and it felt like an afterthought because ultimately it was a small business just, trying to make money and stay alive. And I didn't live in Murray Bridge. I continued to live in Adelaide, so there was no connectivity between me and the audience, and it ended up ultimately feeling a bit sort of shallow for me.
Yeah, right. So you ultimately end up at Fresh 92.7 as a general manager.
That's right.
So tell us about getting to that point where you would take on such a massive opportunity. Like, I mean, first and foremost, having worked in the not-for-profit sector before, it's quite challenging. It takes some guts and courage to actually put your hand up and go for that.
Truth of the matter was I'd worked for most of the commercial stations at that point and was still quite young. So I think it was 30 when I first took on the job as general manager at Fresh. The truth of the matter is I got that job as I've been involved in Fresh, an electronic music station focused on youth, part of the community radio sector like Radio Adelaide. And it was because I'd been involved from the inception of Fresh, and I really was the guy that was around the place that actually was working in radio when other people were aspiring to do it. So not only was I paid to work in radio, I also volunteered at this radio station because it wasn't seen to be in competition with the ones that I was working in. And so I think it was just felt that I was someone that got what was happening at Fresh, and that because I was being paid to do it, that I probably knew more than most, so perhaps they'd give me a crack. The reality was I'd never managed anything and had no idea how to manage a radio station at all. But I think I just was committed and passionate and energetic, and just learnt things very quickly. Some things I did well, some things I did poorly, some things I still can't do. But it was a magnificent opportunity. And really, I was just the leader in what was an environment where, everyone wanted to sort of stick it to the man. It was these young people doing radio, not getting paid to do it, but really feeling like, we can do it better than them, and they're getting paid heaps more money than us. Let us show them.
Yeah, right.
So it's kind of a bit of like a punky attitude to radio.
And you talked about electronic music. Obviously, that's one of your passions. And we know that you've got over 15,000 records in your collection.
Sure do.
And it's growing.
Yes, all the time.
Where did all that begin for you?
It came from my love of art, and I would be in art and design class. And then the year above us, these older students would have free periods and then come into the art area because they wanted to finish off their projects, and they'd bring in a cassette player and they would play this music. Oh, what is this stuff? And it ended up being sort of the evolution of, what we now know as electronic music. And I got very excited about what I was hearing, and it felt like, the aliens had landed and, the future all of a sudden was right in front of us. And it was just, I got swept up in it from that point and just consumed everything I possibly could, bought every magazine I could buy, read it from cover to cover, even the advertisements, and watched every, music TV show I could, listened to every radio show that I could that was even close to being in that space, and just sort of soaked it all up, and then kept buying music, kept working out what my taste was. And then eventually people started thinking that I could DJ just because I'd acquired music, which I'd never done before. I was just playing it on the radio, on community radio. And I just started saying yes, and then had to learn how to DJ, and then over the years have never stopped doing it. It's just something that I feel is a part of me.
And here you find yourself, 6 or 8 years ago at Fresh, managing the station that is something, playing the music that you're really, really excited and passionate about.
Yeah.
What a great marriage. That's just awesome.
Yeah, and second time around working at Fresh as well. I managed Fresh for 3 years. Then I went to Nova for almost 4 years, and then was re-employed by Fresh. Fresh was at a very different stage, and the board was stronger than it had ever been before. I'd learnt a lot through my experience at Nova, and I really wanted to take that experience and finally have Fresh realise its full potential, which was always, in the eyes of the founders, supposed to be a vehicle to get young people jobs in the radio industry, but to also prove that there's another way to do it, and it doesn't have to be done in this sort of traditional way, that, you can play different music on the radio and still keep an audience and do all those types of things. And then over time, Fresh has become this thing that has accidentally taken on the commercial radio stations by virtue of just the community support that it has around it and the loyalty of its audience.
Yeah, and I think the astounding thing about Fresh is watching its journey over the last 5 years particularly has been its growth in terms of the listenership and the innovation that you're doing as a station to really embrace what it is to actually be community as well. You know?
We were one of the fastest moving small businesses in 2016. In fact, we were in the top 25 in the state, which was extraordinary. We were the only arts organisation and the only not-for-profit. And, that just happened from raw passion and creativity and extraordinary community support. It's all those things marrying together, and just some very, very talented young people who just wanted to make an impact. And those things just married together at the right time. And we've now built this this extraordinary beast, which I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes to as we now enter our 20th year. If you take a look back, to that initial period, what seems like a dream is now the reality is that dream has been exceeded.
Absolutely. You seem to be able to find talent, put them together, only to grow them and see them disappear again. And there's recent examples of that through what's happened with Ben and Liam, for example, going over to Triple J. And I mean, what an extraordinary thing. But you put them together, didn't you? And you were able to develop them and harness their talent. Is that something that just happened through the motion, or is it something that you set out to achieve from day one?
I think the radio station always hoped that it would be able to achieve those kind of things, but I think we just sort of casually thought, people get some experience, a bit of hands-on experience, and then they can apply for some jobs with hands-on experience, and that puts them ahead of someone who just did a course and doesn't have any, real-life understanding of how you do radio. But what happened with Ben and Liam will be the greatest developmental success in the radio station's history, even if it continues for another 20 years. Here's, guys 20 and 22 that were given a national breakfast show on the country's, youth broadcaster. They both lived at home. And then all of a sudden, then they were living in Sydney, broadcasting to millions, nationwide. Even for me, that, exceeds what we set out to try and achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. But I think the thing that I get the most satisfaction out of is people that come in just feeling like they'd like to contribute, be part of something, don't really know what they have to offer, and then discover that some of their talents lie within areas that we cover in the radio station. Of course, the radio station is far more than what just goes on in the studio. There's lots of people behind the scenes. In fact, the bulk of people are behind the scenes helping to make those people on the radio sound good. And having those people just see radio as what's going on in the studio, then get involved, then realising, hang on, I could probably get a job here, and then going on to do it exceptionally well, win awards themselves and that kind of thing. That's really exciting. And then when they look back at Fresh and what that experience meant to them in achieving, what they've achieved professionally is that's a lovely thing. It feels like it comes full circle that way.
Yeah, yeah. And we've talked a lot about this on the in-show anyway, about how the evolution of the radio, traditional radio station, has to change over the coming years.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that change? Well, first and foremost, what is it? And then second is are you seeing that as something that is going to be sooner than later?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that with radio, well, let's face it, we're doing a radio show and a podcast simultaneously. That really excites me. I think it's been a great industry for being able to, evolve over time, and I've been involved in it for some 25 years or so. And to think the first radio station I worked at didn't have a website. I mean, I just can't even get my head around that, and I can't believe that the first time that I managed Fresh before I went to Nova, we were using MySpace and YouTube had only just begun. Literally, it was a thing that we heard about that no one was really, we knew that it was building, but I didn't access it too often. And then to what it is now, I think that's really exciting. You've got to embrace these things. But what radio has become is very different. You have to be in lots of spaces simultaneously. The advantage of radio is its mobility in terms of all the media that's available. You don't have to, picking up a newspaper is kind of really hard to do for a young person. Whereas, if you're in a car or if you've got a mobile phone, you can still listen to radio. That's been the real advantage of it. But what we're seeing now is that, people have more dimensions to them than just every day wanting to listen to the radio. Some people want to, but other people will wake up going, not really in the mood for that today. I want to check out something else. So they'll utilise other platforms, which then makes that, listening to things on demand even more important. So I think that's where we're seeing podcasts really start to become popular in much the way that, watching television on demand is also become a thing where, once upon a time we'd all sit down and watch the nightly news at 6 o'clock, you'd be crowded around the television. That really wasn't that long ago. Whereas now, there it is to watch whenever you want to watch it, and that's even your local bulletin. So I think that's where it's going. But it's really it's working in with people's lifestyles more than anything. And, the way that you capture listeners has always been about looking at what people do rather than looking at what you do and forcing it upon people. That's never going to win.
One thing that's been sort of striking me as we've been talking is we talked about sort of my journey and my focus being on music. We've got a very similar journey in the sense that you had a focus on radio. You wanted to get into that medium, and you did it, and you changed, and you shifted direction. How did you feel through that? Was that something that was deliberate? Did you actually look for opportunities and say, I want to go to this step and then go for that? Or was it just you just allowed it to happen?
I've just allowed it to happen, but at the heart of everything has always been the desire to share things with people. And not keep them to myself. When I discover something that I think's outstanding, doesn't matter what it is. Could be fashion, could be music, could be a book, could be a movie that I went to go and see. It could be a place that I visited. I'm one of those types of people that just wants to tell other people about it and have them experience what I've had the good fortune of experiencing myself. And if I look at all of those things I just mentioned, like each of those things shape who I am. We've all had the experience of watching a movie that's just moves you in a way that you sort of come out of the cinema or you come away from the screen just that little bit different. It makes you think a little bit differently. And that's always been my desire. Getting involved in radio was always because I developed a love for music and I wanted to be able to share the music that I loved, which wasn't readily available on the radio, with larger groups of people. It's why I became a DJ. It's why I'm so passionate about being involved in Fresh, is because, as you said, it marries my two loves, electronic music and the vehicle of radio to get it out there, and what radio has now become. So it's always been about sharing. It's not about me, it's about people.
Inspirational. Thank you for that, sharing that story. I mean, I've learned, again, more and more through this conversation, more about how inspiring you are as a human, but also about how underlying everything you do is people. And that's something that I think we could all learn from.
Thank you. And you know what? That's what I love so much about the In Show. When you created the concept for the show and I thought that I could assist you, I definitely think I thought I was out of my depth. Here's a guy that ultimately loves music that wants to share it on the radio. And here I was thinking, that would be interesting because it's something I wouldn't otherwise do. I can help David with the structure here. Thinking that we're going to be talking about all these technical things that are going to be over my head. I'm not great in that area. But what I've discovered in the last 6 months since we've been doing the show is that everyone that we're talking to has passion, has commitment, has a deep desire to make things better. And if I look at what I'm here to do and then what people are sharing with us, I realise that we're all the same. We're just doing it in different ways.
Yeah.
I think it's really exciting.
For more in innovation, check out theinshow.online. You can subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes and rate us 5 stars if you like what you're hearing, and we're on Facebook and Twitter as well.
We definitely are. Tomorrow being a Friday means there's some more inspiration coming your way.
Yeah, that's right, Troy. Tomorrow we've got Melissa Cooper, who's a UX or user experience strategist, and she's got 15 years experience, and she's going to talk to us about how she got involved with Eventbrite.
Most of us have heard of Eventbrite these days, but she got involved at the ground floor. Hear her inspirational words tomorrow on the In Show podcast.
The In Show Interview. Subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes. A Dave and the Beanstalk production.
Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.